Hi, I'm John Sicotte, executive editor of the Brewer magazine. Welcome to the Brewer magazine podcast. Of course, the brewing industry is a competitive market, and you need to find ways to leverage yourself. And leveraging data is actually going to be kind of the thing of the future, I think, or the thing of the now, to enhance every facet of your operation. That means production and marketing, customer experiences. And if you can harness some of that data, you can kind of find some better ways to quality control, supply chains, responding to consumer preferences. There's going to be a lot of things that you can do. And we're going to explore those things right now as we bring in Aaron Gore from Arryved. And always glad to see you. I know some of these people that are watching probably just heard you talking 10 days ago in Portland, Maine at CVP Connects. So how have you been going, and how is Portland?
I am doing wonderful. I made the mistake of on stage saying Portland, Oregon instead of Portland, Maine, because it just rolls off the tongue, and had a bunch of people with lobster rolls in hand ready to kill me, but wound up being fantastic. Craft Beer Professionals does some fantastic work, just bringing people together from around the industry, and it's always a treat to be able to work with folks and just hopefully bring some actionable insights, some of the things they can take back to their own businesses and make them that much more successful and that much more future-proofed.
Yeah, and I thought it was a great idea to be able to talk about it here at Brewer Mag too. And you've had some great background. For people that don't know, give us the elevator pitch of who the hell you are and what you do. And you can go more than elevator pitch. I know you have a good resume, so feel free.
How big is this elevator? Good resume might be overselling it. Let's not overpromise here, but no. So I am Aaron Gore. I'm the director of partnerships and community for Arryved. We're a company that does software solutions for all aspects of the brewing industry. But point of sale is really the one that we're most well known for, the one that really got us started in the first place. But as far as my background's concerned, I've actually only been with the company since January. Prior to that, I was building platforms across the industry, just helping manage scalable production distribution for 23 breweries and managing 76 wholesalers on their behalf. So the classic many to many headache. Need a lot of data to keep up with something like that. And prior to that, I was a consultant for the industry, worked with more than 70 breweries on 3 continents. So got a chance to do just about anything in this industry you can name other than brewing the beer. My running joke is I have actually, and it is true, brewed 2 commercial batches of beer. No one wants me doing a third. I don't even want me doing a third. I'm terrible at it. But every other aspect of it, I've at least had the opportunity to do it at a professional level and be able to work with some brilliant people from across the industry and learn from them, and then carry those learnings on to help others.
Yeah, and I think kind of what I said in the intro is data really is becoming the leverage manufacturer for craft breweries. I mean, why is paying attention to different types of data so important for a craft brewery now, as things have gotten shrunk down? And we'll go into some of the stuff that is really important, but why is it important to start paying attention to this stuff?
Yeah, and it's really one of those almost even a false question, because they always should have been paying attention to it. You've always needed to pay attention to your data, but when you've got this rising tide and this growth industry, it's easy for a lot of the things that you should be doing to not happen, and you still show a level of success. But now more than ever, with the industry maturing a little bit, I don't say slowing down. It is slowing down, but a lot of people get real doomer around it, and that's not what's happening. This is always going to happen. We're always going to have to grow up a bit, and that means slower growth. But even with that happening, a lot of folks are starting to do this. They're turning into turtles, and they're really going into survival mode. And I understand why. I'm completely sympathetic why. But what we really need to be doing right now is reinvesting in your business and taking it a lot more seriously, not just as an expensive hobby, but as an actual business that needs to be sustained and nurtured and taken seriously, because those are going to be the breweries that survive this portion and thrive into the future. So why data? Why now? Well, one of the worst things that we have a tendency to do in this industry, I've seen it time and time again, is people within it really, they do believe, why do I need all this data? Why do I need all this information? Who knows my business better than me? I'm in it every day. I'm working in it. I know my business best. I know my customers best. Like, what could I possibly get from pulling some of this information? And, I get that. But when you make decisions with your gut, you're the one who has to eat the consequences. And at the end of the day, you have the same biases and the same lack of information, the same lack of focus on particular issues that any of us would in those circumstances. So by focusing on data and then applying your experience and that context that you bring to that data, that's how you're able to really figure out where you actually are, not just where you feel like you are, and find the opportunities, the trends, the risks that otherwise you might not be able to see, so that you can attack them proactively instead of reactively.
Right, right. And, we're using the word data, which is such a broad term. What's an important start? Other than just, I'm making this much and I spent this much. There's to be able to dig in, or to be able to look at butts in seats or ticket numbers. Where are some of those key pieces that a brewery, depending on and obviously this comes down to model as well. What's important, or what are the keys, the beginning, the building blocks of data collection?
Yeah, and when I say data, a lot of people, they get a little nervous because they're imagining things like linear regressions and t-tests and p-values and all the stuff that you were supposed to be learning when you were sleeping through your high school statistics class, and it's not any of that at all. What I mean when I say data is honestly truth. Being able to get information, and the information itself being objective, being drawn from the same source, so you're comparing apples to apples, so that you actually have something that, yes, what you interpret out of it, the insights you get out of it, those are going to rely on your experience, your context, your individual business. But at least you can rest assured that the information you're acting on is accurate. So it's stuff that in a lot of cases breweries already have a ton of access to. We, like I said, point of sale system is really the bread and butter for our organization. And you are probably, no matter what you're using, if it's Arryved or it's another quality platform, keep in mind the term quality is doing a lot of heavy lifting there, should have an enormous amount of information. So sales info is one that almost everybody is at least looking at. What have you sold on a given night? What are your top selling products? And that's great. And you should be looking at that. And that's, absolutely critical to understand what's actually being sold in your business, where you're doing business. But it's only a start. So one of the chief things that I see a lot of breweries not doing is actually tracking their cost of goods. A lot of them are not doing a great job of tracking cost of goods on the back end when it comes to their actual sales to the market, but they're definitely not doing a great job of tracking it in your tap room, which can lead to circumstances where, yes, what your top seller is, and you've got 4 IPAs on there, and they're absolutely just crushing that porter you got on, but there's a couple of things that might be, not necessarily, but might be in play. Do you need 4 IPAs? If you took 2 of those off, are you going to still sell just as much total category IPA? Are they cannibalizing each other to a degree? Or do you need 7? Maybe you need more than that. If you took off that porter, even if it's a lower seller, are you losing an entire class of customer who only drinks dark beer versus taking off one of those IPAs? And then if you're tracking that cost of goods, are you really able to figure out what's actually making the impact on your business? Because people need to keep in mind, you don't put revenue in the bank. You put profits in the bank. Hazy IPAs are expensive to make. There's a lot of beers that are like that. And that's not me picking on hazies by any stretch, because for a lot of businesses, they're a key component of their business, and they should be. But what you need to have is an understanding of exactly what is actually impacting how much cash you have in the bank at the end of any given month. And the only way you can do that is to have a larger understanding of what your cost of goods actually is, what it's selling for, how much you're selling, and the broad buckets of products that they fall into. And I say that because we tend to, in this industry, and I'm sure almost everybody watching this, the people who read the Brewer magazine are definitely in this category of, we tend to look at things in terms of like BJCP, style guidelines, and we get very, very narrow with it. So if some brewery has on, for example, a blonde ale, a Czech Pils, a German Pils, and a Kolsch, well, of course, the fine people watching this and reading this understand that those are 4 very distinct, very unique styles that all have their own qualities that are completely and specific to them. To customers, that's 4 of the same freaking beer. They do not see it in the same way that we do, and they never will. That's not even an education thing. That even if they knew it, they just don't care that much about beer, and that's okay. They have things in their life they care that much about, but we are the obsessees so that they don't have to be. And only by understanding how customers are approaching your products can you really get a good feel for what your mix needs to be, whether that's in the tap room or it's out in the market.
Yeah, absolutely. COGS is such a big thing. I think that people don't understand how important it is to track that, because they're just happy, especially when they're first starting. We're just happy to open and be serving beer. Cost be damned. We want to make the best beer, but it is like a personal experience here in the Toledo area. We have some breweries that are entering that 6 to 8 year idea, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, gee, wait, like I need to scale back. And, we've been throwing beer out in the market. We're not making any money on it. We need to figure out what, we have cores, we have popular beers, but they're not making us any money. So it is interesting to start when you start digging into this, because I think people see it as this like, oh, that's the business side, and I'm the big picture person, or the entrepreneurial person. You need to have that thought process, though, the business mindset, to be able to make a successful brewery continue to go through.
Well, it's one of the challenges is, this is a special industry. It's a unique industry, and it asks an enormous amount of you. I've always made the comparison with chefs. No one does this because they're sane. We do this because we're insane, of a certain particular variety, but most importantly, because we're passionate. We do it because we love beer and we love people, which is one of the reasons why almost everybody who starts a brewery does so, because they want to make beer. Well, 6 months later, they realize that owning a brewery has very, very little to do with making beer. It is running a small business, and you wear 1,000 hats. And the number one reason that breweries close down is cash flow issues. The number two reason that breweries close down are lease issues. Lack of demand, which is inclusive of so many things above and beyond just beer quality, is all the way down at 4% of all breweries that close their doors. So, what none of those things have in common is that none of them are making beer. There are so many areas of your business that really rely on you to be able to manage them. And, humans don't scale. There's only so many hours in the day, and there's only so much energy and focus that you have. So you need to make sure that you're working on your business, not just working in your business. And that means having the information you need to run it effectively, so that you can get back to the beer and people that made you love this in the first place.
Yeah. Do you see that a lot when you start talking to people, that they don't have that? They might understand that they have to run a business, but they don't actually understand how to run the business, and being able to show them there are easy ways to do this. I think that's, maybe not easy. It takes time, but there's ways to be able to do this, and you can be able to use a platform to be able to give you this data, and then find those key pieces that will help them the most.
Yeah, all the time. The goal of all of this is to be able to give you the tools you need to get you back to the reason that you're doing this in the first place. And for a lot of folks, and I get why, they see these tools as being one more thing they have to manage. And in most cases, it's actually the exact opposite. No one in 2024 would ever think of running a tap room using pen and paper for their cash register. It would just absolutely be insane. Of course, you're going to use some sort of point of sale system, to the point where I have literally, even the smallest, tiniest little tap rooms that I've walked into, that's basically just somebody handing you growlers across a piece of wood on a sawhorse. Even they are at least using something digital to actually help them with that. But the same extends even back into the brew house and back into the rest of the operations side of the business. So we also do brewery management software, and there's some other fantastic ones out there in the market as well. Shout out to my guys at Beer 30, who also do some great stuff. But one of the key things that I see time and time again is that more than half of all the breweries in the U.S. aren't using any sort of system to manage inventory and finished goods and sales. They don't have any sort of CRM, and they're doing all of that on spreadsheets, and sometimes they are doing it by hand. And the reason I get every single time is it's just not worth the money when they can do it themselves. But here's the thing: the amount of money that you'd be spending, yes, some of those options are more expensive or more intended for an enterprise sort of situation. That is one of the areas where Beer 30 lives. They are fantastic for larger, more mature breweries, but even at the smallest scale, there are options like Arryved Brewery Management, a couple others out there that are really a lot more focused on being accessible. And yes, it might cost you $99 a month, but how much does your own labor cost? And even if you count your own labor as being free, what are the other areas of your business that you have to have your hands on, that you should and can be doing, what impact are those things going to have if they're not getting done because you're sitting there trying to track 1,000 Excel spreadsheets and do manual hard count reconciliations on inventory and manage all of your CRM? Instead of that, you're just running everything through QBO. It's a nightmare. And before you know it, you've actually probably spent thousands of dollars in opportunity cost internally and your own labor when you could have been having a tool do most of that for you. At the very least, make it so you have fewer mistakes, fewer headaches.
Absolutely. Is it something that can be started right at the beginning? If a brewery is in that planning stage right now, is it a cost that should be looked at immediately, or is it something that is you kind of grow into? I'm sure you have that question a lot.
We get that question a lot, and the big point, and I make the same point on the point of sale side as well, is in general, find tools that will grow with you. There will definitely be pivot points where sometimes the tools just don't work as well. Point of sale is not so much. I mean, point of sale, as once you hit a minimum level of functionality, definitely, you'll probably scale as large as that facility is going to get, because tap rooms only go up to so large of a business. Even the largest tap rooms in the country are only so large relative to a large business. And there are definitely ones that are too small. I know for a lot of folks, and I won't name any names, but we'll just call this one Cube, as one that a lot of folks around the industry definitely jump in on first, because it sounds a lot more economical. It sounds like all that they need. And by far, it's our number one source of being able to bring new breweries into our own ecosystem, because it just doesn't know what you need to do for a tap room. You can run a farmer's market, like a farm stand, off of it. You can run a sunglass hut off of it. It's not going to do what you need for something that's got complex inventory, and you happen to do table by table. You need reporting that's actually going to be workable for your local reporting needs, local regulatory bodies, your accountants, which we have a nightmare to report on when it comes to any regulated industry like alcohol. Those are things you got to consider. And do you want to try and change over all of that stuff when you're trying to run the business, and now you have a potential Saturday where things can go down because you're trying to manage implementation? Or do you want to get on them day one and really be able to build into them? And I'd say the same thing even to the back of house. Like if you're managing anything over, let's say, 100 barrels, if you're an actual business, then you're going to have areas that are going to be commanding your time, your energy, and focus. And in some ways, it can actually require more of it if you are timed, because you might still have a day job. So for you to be able to manage all those aspects of your business, getting these tools that on your P&L are a fraction of your total expenses, and they save you tons of headaches the entire way and make you that much more or less likely to run into headaches in the other areas of your business. That's such a value add that I definitely recommend everyone at least look into it, because there's likely going to be a solution, whether through us or somebody else. It's going to make your life a lot easier in trying to do all that by hand.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about some data sets. And I had emailed you this question, things that maybe get overlooked but are important. And, let's start front of house in the tap room. What's a data set that is important to track? And I know we've talked a little bit about that. And then, on the back end, on the production side, in those COGS, what is like some key numbers that you are starting to see to be really important for breweries to see, like positives and negatives on a fast scale?
Yeah, one of the chief ones is just going to be staffing. Labor has become harder and harder for tap rooms to capture in the last few years, as we've seen unemployment down significantly across the country, and that's meant especially at low level service positions. I don't mean low level for low skill, but just lower paying service positions have become extremely hard to fill. Very hard to find people to work in your brewery tap room when the liquor bar down the street's hiring for triple what you can afford, and you got McDonald's who's kicking $20 an hour for kids out of high school. Makes it very challenging. So knowing exactly how many people you need on staff and when is critical, because if you're understaffed, then that's going to make it so that service suffers, or you can't be open as many hours. Customers have a bad time. Your staff is stressed. That's not good for anybody. But the flip side, overstaffing is also an issue, because you need to be able to hire the people in the first place, which is more of a challenge than it's been. But it also dilutes your tip pool, which can make you less likely to keep around people you do actually already have. So having really good insight into what you're selling and when is key. So just make sure that whatever point of sale you're using is able to track your sales down to the hour and to the day of the week. And even if that means going through like a third party source like 7Shifts, which is a fantastic application for scheduling and staffing, is great for being able to make sure that you have the right people on the right days and that your open hours actually make sense. You might be open an hour that you are losing money on consistently every week, or you might see huge sales immediately after opening that tells you can actually extend those forward a bit, or huge sales at the end of the evening, which means maybe you can stay open a little longer than you are otherwise. These are things that you're not going to be able to see unless you're really diving in on that level of granularity. The other big one I always tell people as far as a North Star, I mean, obviously total sales and total margin are critical for your tap room, but the number of people coming through the door, that is something that your management is responsible for. That is something that your marketing is responsible for, events are responsible for. By far the biggest thing that your actual bar staff is responsible for is average ticket value. That is my single favorite statistic for front of house, because that's what they're actually impacting. Are they taking the upsell opportunities? Are they creating a welcoming experience that makes people want to stay and want to have one more beer? They feel welcome when they walk in the door so that they're primed to be engaged from moment one. Do you have multiple areas for them to order from? QR ordering, like our open tab at the table, or they have to come up to the front? And is that intentional either way that you're running your service model? You need to be able to look at average ticket value, because that's going to be that North Star as to how you're actually performing from the moment people cross your threshold until the moment that they leave.
Very nice. And when it comes to the back of house stuff, how is what sales is doing impacts what can be done for the future? Be that a style that is missing, or it's a beer that is being made that the brewer really loves making, but is it selling the way? Is there a pull through for it?
Yep, absolutely. And honestly, revenue per barrel is one of those key ones for the back of house that you really need to track. I know Kerry Shumway from Craft Brewery, financialtraining.com, fantastic resource in general, but that's one of the ones that he leans on pretty heavy, because that's telling you that if you are constrained by the amount of tank space you have, and any successful businesses are eventually going to run to the point where you just don't have any more tanks to give, you need to understand how much money you're going to be making in for X unit of capacity. The actual percent margin is important from kind of the opposite side, where if you have the tank space to spare, now you need to make sure that you're maximizing the amount of money you're actually bringing in. So being able to really take a look at both sides. How can we make as much money from as little beer as possible, and how can we sell as much beer total as possible, are really the two things that you need to focus on, because that's what the business is. We do a really bad job in this industry of creating beer and then hoping to God that we can sell it. If you're putting 30 barrels of beer in the tank and at least 25 barrels of that does not already have a home, then you really need to re-examine what you're doing, because inventory is just another word for risk. The two are synonyms. The moment you put out cash for raw materials and you put out cash for labor and it goes into a tank, you are parking that cash and hoping to God it eventually comes back and then some. So you really have to keep a close eye on that, because our cash cycles are messed up in this industry. You know, you got to pay out your vendors 30 days, 45 days if you got a great relationship with them, for that grain, for the hops, for everything that you're putting into that product. And it's probably going to be 90 to 120 days before you actually get all that product sold. So you're already starting out behind the eight ball from a cash flow standpoint. Don't set yourself up poorly by not doing forecasting. So look at your sales information, look at the rates of sale, days on hand at your wholesalers, days on hand in your own warehouse if you're doing self-distro. Look at what your tap room's doing. Tap room is the number one source of revenue for 84% of breweries. And it's the number one source of margin for like 98% of them. So make sure you have an understanding what their needs are, what their velocities are for these different business units, so that when you produce product, you've got a pretty good idea of how it's going to sell and where it's going to sell, because otherwise all you're doing is taking a guess, and guesswork is a very, very risky proposition when you've got a lot of people whose livelihoods are depending on you to stay open.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you had mentioned data is truth. Being able to not just, I think a lot of times people want to say, oh, well, everyone's saying what a great beer this is across the bar. Everyone's really enjoying this. It's all the anecdotal pieces, especially in smaller breweries, that they'll be like, well, we have this group of people that come in every Thursday and, they'll all buy a round and really enjoy it. Well, yeah, that's great. But let's look at the numbers and see, is that beer actually selling the rest of the week, or is it just getting that bump on a Thursday or something like that? That's where important data is important, because again, I think a lot of people go off that the bartenders, seem to really feel like they're selling a lot of this. Look at the number first. Are they actually selling it, or does it just sound like it?
Trust but verify. And at the end of the day, I can get 5 people to say literally anything. I mean, if you give me a week, I can find 5 people to agree to literally anything that we set out to confirm for ourselves. But when you have a large enough sample size, and in the course of your own brewery operations, you are day to day, you are getting adequate sample sizes. Now, it's a lot harder to get a large group of people to all say anything other than the truth. And that might be their own truth, but when you're able to aggregate all that, get a good sense of what's actually happening, now you can figure out what that means for what you need to do next. And that could vary based on your business model, your differentiation, your brand, like what your own constraints. But until you understand what's actually happening and not just what everybody feels like is happening, there's entire bodies of research on how terrible we are at recognizing truth, even when we see it day in and day out. Get the data, get the information, because all of us have our own unique takes and angles, and sometimes that can cloud what otherwise seems to be so obvious to us. Information, data helps.
Yes, excellent. Well, Aaron, I think you opened some people's eyes. I think I'm taking notes here, because I have things that I'm just going to start writing about from this. That it's always, I love being able to have these kind of conversations, because it's not about like, this is how you can do it. It's more about, here's ways you can do it, and find your own way. I mean, there's no perfect business model. If someone tries to sell you on a perfect business model, they're selling you something, because it's so, especially in this industry, it is so down to the corner of what your neighborhood is that can be able to distinguish how successful your business can be. But at least there's data that can help you move it along.
Yeah, data isn't necessarily telling you what you should be doing, but it does tell you where you're starting from. You still have to be the one who's guiding that ship. And if you're doing that based purely on what you would like the truth to be, and that's where most of us are, then chances are good you're probably going to be taking paths you wouldn't otherwise if you knew exactly where you are. Same reason why I tell people, when it comes to getting feedback on your brand or on your beer, go outside your friends and family. I can't tell you how many people have started breweries and realized that their beer was not nearly as good as they thought it was, only talking to their spouses and parents and best friends. Of course, they're going to tell you your beer is great. I'm sure they even believe it's great. Get out beyond that. Talk to people, get some of this information. And honestly, if you're using any tools, any sort of ERP, CRM, or point of sale, you probably got it already. So use it. It's not there to replace you. It's quite the opposite. It's there to help you be that much more effective.
Awesome. Aaron, thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Don't forget, you can always check on brewermag.com. You can also see us on YouTube and listen to us on Spotify. And don't forget daily updates on Facebook, Instagram, and X. I'm Executive Editor John Sicotte for brewermagazine.com.